Hello, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are going to get started in just a couple of moments. In the meantime, we want to give you just a moment to jot down your thoughts on your October drill. Upcoming and exciting as it is, it can be somewhat nerve-wracking as well. And so if you have any questions about your October drill, albeit whether it's a brand new first-time drill or one that you've done many, many times before, please go ahead and share those with us in the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. In the meantime, we'll give a few more people just a few more seconds to join us, and we'll get started in just about a minute. Alrighty, hello everyone, and thank you again so much for being with us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about our October drills, and before we jump in, just a quick reminder to those of you that are new on the series. This is a series that we began at the beginning of this school year, and we're conducting a webinar every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern for schools all across the country. And our goal through these webinars is to share new and updated information with you on a weekly basis, and to help really share the story of what many of our consultants are working with our very own schools on as we go through the year. So at the beginning of the year, we started off by looking at immunizations and planning for the first day. And now as we're beginning to go through the year, we're really looking at what are the upcoming and major milestones that we need to hit. And October drills are one of them for many of you that you'll certainly want to, if not need, to hit. With that said, my name is Chris, and I'm the CEO of Joffe Emergency Services, a school safety consulting team that runs truly nationwide. Our headquarters is based in Los Angeles. Our farthest schools are based in New York and DC, some in Boston and the Massachusetts area. We have consultants on the East Coast, in Northern California, and in Southern California, and between those teams, we're able to truly handle and work with almost every school in the country. So we're excited that you're with us today, and we're excited to talk with you a little bit about preparing for your October drill. So let's dive in. First things first, for many of us, we consider our October drill our big drill. And so we're going to talk today about why we conduct a big drill and why it's important to do so. We're going to talk about whether or not October is the right time for you to conduct a big drill. We're going to talk about the type of drill that you might want to run, whether it's one that you've done before or if you're prepared to try something new. We'll talk about what challenges we're ready to insert into our drills. We'll talk about what help you may need, whether it's from a safety consulting team or from your local providers or from maybe just within your own school. And finally, we'll talk about what resources to really bring in. Again, throughout this conversation, it's imperative to us that we hear and answer your questions, so please feel free to share your questions on the right-hand side of the screen. And in fact, before we get started, I'll ask you, what type of drills or what drills have you done in the past? What types of big drills have you done in the past? And we'll go ahead and share that poll with you here in just a moment. And so again, on your screen now, we have, do you do an annual big drill at your school? And for some of you, the answer is a clear and easy yes. For others, it's a clear and easy no. And for some of you, it may be the third option, which is, well, we're just getting by doing our day-to-day drills, so no, a big drill, we haven't done that quite yet. And I'll let you go ahead and take a moment just to answer those. And let's see what you said. So it looks like a clean, even split. About half of you said, no, we don't do big drills at our school yet. And some of you, actually about half of you said, well, we're just getting by as it is. So for both categories there, and our yeses, you just didn't come forward this time. But for both categories that responded, our goal today is to help you prepare for your first big drill. And frankly, if it's your first big drill, then October may or may not be the best time of the year to do it, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is a little bit later on. But nonetheless, know that it is important that you at least attempt a big drill at some point through the year. And if October is not your time, that's okay. Many of our schools don't do them in October, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward today. So no pressure, but we'll talk specifically about both October and then the big drill. So let's hop in. First and foremost, why are we talking about this big drill? What is a big drill, and why do we even need to do it? Well, a big drill is an annual test of all of our systems. So far in this conversation, in the school safety series, we've talked about emergency notification systems. We've talked about the need for various teams that do different functions and roles. And the best way to test all of those things is to test them all together. We know that our emergency notification system works because we've tested it. We know that our teams work because we test them and we train them. We know that our students know what to do because they go through these drills on a monthly basis. We know that our staff and our faculty know what to do because they go through them with the students on a monthly basis, or if you don't do them monthly, they go through them on a regular basis at least. But we don't necessarily know that all of these various systems work together, and we certainly don't know yet whether or not they all work together well, especially if we haven't had an opportunity to test them all together. And so the reason that we do this big drill is that we want to make sure that we're actually conducting a drill that utilizes all of those systems together, that all of those systems, as they're individually built, come together to create a comprehensive response to an emergency of any size. And so regardless of whether or not you've done one in the past, this is your opportunity to start to plan for one now. Now, timing is everything. For those of you that said, no, you haven't done one before, or you're just getting by as it is, know that timing is everything. There are some really key advantages to October. It's early on in the year. So for those of you that have new students, and hopefully that's every one of you, it gives them an opportunity to actually learn what we do during this drill, and it gives them an opportunity to see it all come together early on in the year. For those of you who have new staff and faculty, and many of you do, it gives them an opportunity to participate and to practice early on in the year. It also helps to reinforce all of that training that you did in August as they return to school, or for some of you even in the first week of September, as they return to school and reminded themselves what drills look like and what the emergency preparedness program looks like at your school. And so it gives an opportunity to train and then to reinforce relatively early on in the year, and that can be a real advantage. It gives us an opportunity to use the ShakeOut, and for those of you on the West Coast, it actually gives us an opportunity to use the ShakeOut and all of the PR and the news and the media that goes around it to really conduct an effective drill and to make our parents pretty happy. It gives us an opportunity to really explain why we do it and to incorporate our parent community into the drill. And again, it gives us an opportunity to practice before the year gets too far away from us. And so for those new faculty and new staff members that just don't know what we do quite yet, it gives them an opportunity to see it, to test it, and then to give their own feedback and thoughts to the program as we go through the rest of the year. Now, there are also some key disadvantages to doing a drill in October and doing a big drill in October. Of course, there's little to no time to prepare. So again, for those of you that said, no, we haven't done one yet, or well, we're struggling a little bit, it's early. You don't have a whole lot of time between now and mid to late October to practice and to effectively prepare your staff and your faculty and your student body for this drill, and you may not have time to actually get the parent communication out that we'll talk about in a little while. It requires staff meetings up front, and staff meetings are one of the most difficult times to get on the calendar, and I can tell you from experience that it's challenging for us to get that time. And so if that's not something that can be given up at the early part of the year, it may not be something that we're ready for. Weather, for some of you, the weather in October is just not really cooperating with or ready for a drill. And finally, students tend to be a little bit younger, a little bit less mature, a little bit less resilient because it's so early on in the year. So as they age and mature through the course of the year, you may find yourself with a more successful drill later on. People ask me about that all the time. And I say, well, if you look at a kindergartner in September, October, and you look at that same kindergartner in April or May, you're looking at two different students. And your student in April or May is going to be far more resilient and far more capable of participating and coming back to school and being comfortable than that same kindergartner earlier on in the year. Now, that's not to say that if you have a kindergarten class at your school that you should wait, but it's certainly a disadvantage or a challenge that you need to be prepared to encounter and to get through. So if timing's everything, well, drill type is also everything. And so I'll give you just a couple of examples of the types of drills that many of our schools do conduct. Fire, earthquake, and lockdown tend to be the most common on the West Coast. Believe it or not, they should be common nationwide. Shelter in place is a drill that every school worldwide should be participating in or conducting. Many of our schools don't actually conduct a shelter in place on a regular basis, but they'll do one, say, once a year or twice a year, and that's absolutely okay. Others have a need to do so more frequently, and so if your school is located near a power plant or a refinery or anything that may, frankly, explode and cause a challenge in the air quality around you, that's a good reason to do shelter in places more frequently. The degree of difficulty of them is a little bit higher than any other drill, and the need for 100% and quick action tends to be a little bit higher because of the fact that each classroom or office is really self-sufficient during these drills. Tornadoes, obviously there are parts of the country where tornado drills make a lot of sense and you need to do them on a regular basis, and then there are other parts where you don't necessarily. And so if you're in an area where you do tornado drills, and now's a good time to do them. I would challenge you to conduct your tornado drill with something else so that it's a little bit more comprehensive than just getting into your safe space or your tornado space, whatever you may call it. Bad weather drills, again, for some of you, and incidentally, when I say bad weather, I'm talking about cold, blizzard conditions, as opposed to the bad weather that many of you are experiencing now, which is hot and miserably hot, in fact, for many of you. But it's those types of drills that tend to be the most productive. And again, if you're doing a weather-related drill, I would challenge you to add another layer to it, and we'll talk a little bit about what that might look like a little bit later on. And of course, then there are other drills that you can conduct, and these tend to be school or location specific. I have a school that I talk about a lot that's right near a jail, and every time that jail has a prisoner get loose or have a challenge, that school has to go into lockdown. So they do so on a bi-monthly basis, and that can be an increased challenge for them, and that's something that they're prepared for, and that because they practice so much, they're really, really good at. I have another school that is right down the street from an oil refinery, and for them, it's a shelter-in-place combined with a get-out. And so as soon as the shelter-in-place is complete, they actually load up on a bus and, well, multiple buses, and they get out of Dodge. And so other drills can certainly be added, and again, these are generally school-specific or location-specific, and we can continue to look at what makes the most sense for your specific area. Julia, it looks like you had a really good question that just came in. Well, what's the difference between a lockdown and shelter-in-place drill? And in short, next week we're going to be talking about lockdowns, and we're actually broadening the term next week to be movement restriction. And movement restriction really encompasses three different types of drill. The first is a secure campus, or I should say three different types of responses. The first is secure campus. The second is shelter in place, and the third is lockdown. And a secure campus is a drill that we often will conduct, or a response that we'll often conduct when something's going awry in the neighborhood. So there's a bank robbery down the street. There's police activity out in the street. I have a school that is on a strip of the Southern California area where oftentimes Obama, when he comes to town, will drive right by the school. And so they'll secure the campus every time he drives by. And again, that's generally an off-campus, non-threat to the campus, but threat to the general community. Shelter-in-place is a step above that, and shelter-in-place tends to be human-manufactured, but it doesn't always need to be. It certainly doesn't have to be. And shelter-in-place is when there's an environmental threat. And so it really looks a lot like lockdown. We're getting everybody inside. We're getting everybody quickly to respond to an environmental concern. But then we're also looking at additional systems like turning off the HVAC or the air conditioning system. And we're looking at sealing doors and windows and making sure that no air can get from outside to inside, or at least that does get from outside to inside is clean and pure. And then finally, we have lockdown, which most frequently tends to be a human-made scenario, although it's not always. And lockdown is where we're actually all the way inside, we're all the way locked down, our lights are off, our students are down as low to the ground as they can get, and we're waiting for further instruction, generally from the police. And so again, we'll talk a little bit more about those three responses and how those can be drilled and tested in our conversation next week. And so definitely, Julia, we'll want to see you there so that you can learn even more. But in short, the key difference is that in general, a shelter-in-place is something that's environmentally created, and the lockdown tends to be something that's human-created, and we're going to respond to each of those a little bit differently. Obviously, if it's the environment we're concerned about, it's a matter of sealing it out. And if it's a human or multiple humans that we're concerned about, then we're also looking at quote-unquote sealing them out, but it's going to be through security measures as opposed to duct tape and plastic and things like that. So great question. Now, what type of drills should you actually conduct? And again, this is going to be something that you'll have to decide based on your school, what you've done before, what challenges you've encountered before, and what successes you've encountered before. So if you know that your earthquake drill is really, really solid, then I'd recommend that for the first time you do this big drill, that you use an earthquake drill. What we want to do is increase the degree of difficulty, but maintain the degree of success. And so although we're challenging ourselves more and we're raising the bar and we're looking to continue to find something more and more difficult, we always want our staff and our faculty and our students, and probably most importantly our parents, to recognize and to feel success at the end of this drill. This is a drill that oftentimes sets the pace for the emergency preparedness program for the year, and so if it's a really, really good drill, then we have an opportunity to continue to raise the bar as we go forward. If it's a really, really challenging drill and we feel like we weren't successful, then at times it can actually detract from the rest of the year and make it so that we have to put all of this energy into improving that one specific drill as opposed to spreading our energy across multiple different types of responses. And so again, as we go through this and we look at the type of drill that makes sense, or the challenges that we may want to incorporate, what I'll ask you to do is to really think, well, how can I increase the degree of difficulty, because that's definitely important, but how can I ensure that we're going to be successful, and if we're not, that we have a way to remedy that. And of course, emergencies and preparedness is all about redundancy, and so if one thing fails, well, what can we do to ensure that something else will be there to pick up and to care for it, and to ensure that ultimately that the overall experience is successful. Now, again, and I just can't reinforce it enough, we absolutely must increase our degree of difficulty only as much as we're prepared for. I have schools that come to me all the time and say, hey, can you just come in and run a moulage drill? And what we call our big drills is moulage drills, and basically that includes the moulage, or the makeup that we put onto students and staff and faculty, so we simulate these injuries, and of course we test the emergency notification systems, and we test the reunification process, and so throughout the conversation today I'll refer to them as either big drills or moulage drills, and I'm talking about the same thing. But I have schools that will say, well, can you just come and do a moulage drill for us? And I say, well, absolutely. What kind of drill have you done before? And they'll say, well, we did a fire drill last year. And I'll say, well, what else? And they'll say, that's it. And I'll say, all right, well, give me a call again in about a year, because what you need to do is practice and get really, really comfortable and good at your regular drills, and then we'll add to the degree of difficulty, and we'll make it more challenging and complicated, and then we can start to do some of these things that I'll talk about in just a moment. But as you prepare for this big drill, only increase the degree of difficulty to a point at which you feel that comprehensively and overall you can still be successful. Well, what are some things that you can do to increase it? Number one, have some missing students. This is actually something that I would suggest not only during your moulage or your big drill that you do, but that you do on a regular basis. It's really easy, and it's a good way to keep everybody on their toes. And finally, it really tests your attendance team, which is perhaps one of the most important teams early on in the drill. So how do you arrange for missing students? You can do it in a number of different ways. The first and probably the easiest is while the drill is starting and you have everybody evacuating and moving out of the buildings, just take 2 or 3 students that are on the way out and say, hey, you go over there, and invite them to sit in a classroom or sit in the library or sit anywhere where you can keep an eye on them, but they're not out with the rest of the group, and check to see if they're actually accounted for by the attendance team. I would guess that about 70% of the time they'd be accounted for, and probably about 30% of the time on any given school campus they wouldn't be. That's obviously a challenge and a hole in the system that has to be filled in one way or another. And so if the attendance team is not able to identify that those students are missing, then hopefully the search and rescue team has identified that those students are actually in that library or wherever they are. If that feels like it's too haphazard or too loose and free, you can also pre-plan the students that will be missing. And so talk with a group of students, again, I would say anywhere from 3 to 6, and say to them, hey, when the drill happens, this is where I want you to go, and I want you to try to get there without anybody noticing you. And now, again, you've tested your attendance system, but you've done so with a little bit more planning and notice. And for some of you, that may feel a little bit more comfortable. Either way, your attendance team should identify them as missing, and hopefully your attendance team will say to your command center, hey, we've got these missing students, and your command center will say to your search and rescue team, great, go find them, and we'll be off and running. Radio malfunction is another great one. One of the things I do during a lot of our moulage drills is about halfway through the drill, if everything's going really smoothly, I'll just push down and hold one of the radio push-to-talk buttons. And you'd think that people would recognize that and just switch to another channel or figure out an alternative method of communication, but it tends not to be quite that simple for most. Instead, what we find a lot of times is that people will panic. People will go, well, wait, we don't have communications anymore. What do we do now? And it's, again, a very easy way to just test people's ability to be resilient and to move through a situation and pass through a situation that can be challenging. Increase the count of injured. So for those of you that have done these drills in the past, if you've had folks that have played the role of an injured person, increase the number. For those of you that haven't, what I'm talking about here is putting some makeup on somebody, and frankly they don't even necessarily have to have that, but having them simulate that they've been injured in whatever type of emergency this is. Now, I tend to use natural disasters here, and this is especially true for younger students, but it does work with any type of drill you do. But natural disasters, people tend to be very comfortable with injuries that are created. So put differently, it's very easy to explain to a 4th or a 5th grader that if there was an earthquake, that something might fall down and might hurt them, and therefore that might be the reason that they have that broken arm that we're pretending they have. I tend to feel less comfortable doing that same injury or having that same conversation with a 4th or a 5th grader when we're talking about a lockdown or something that's human-made. Not to say that it's not possible, and certainly it's something that some schools choose to do. But if this is the first time, I would ease in, and I would say use a natural disaster, or use something like a fire or an earthquake or a tornado, something that gives you the opportunity to say, well, nature happened and you were injured as a result. Now, I mentioned students, but you can also have injured staff and faculty. And so again, if you're looking to increase the degree of difficulty because you've done this before, one of the things you might look to do is actually have your command center be injured. So either one person from your command team or your entire command center is out of commission and is unavailable to help lead the school. That can be really difficult. It can be, in fact, for some schools, debilitating. And so again, if you're prepared for it, great. If not, I would suggest that you take the person with the smallest role or function in the command team out, and then you have the rest of the command team in place. And I suppose take them out is probably not the best way to describe them in this particular scenario, but have them be removed from the drill by way of simulating an injury. Utilize your emergency notification system. I list that as an increase in your challenge, but really that is even a given in any of these large-scale drills. At minimum, we should be testing that emergency notification system and sending out a message to parents to say, hey, we're testing our emergency notification system. If you didn't get this, call us. And of course, that's always funny because people say, well, isn't that like when you ask everybody in a classroom if they're here and say, raise your hand if you're not? But what really happens there is we send out the message and we send it out to our entire parent community, and 95% of our parent community gets it, but a handful don't. Well, we hope that there's enough communication within the community that people say, hey, well, you didn't see that message? Or we give a specific direction in that message, like when you receive this, please reply with the number 1. And that gives us the ability to say, oh, okay, well, we only heard from X number of our actual parents. Bring in external support or external factors. So you can actually bring your fire department or your local police department in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the conversation today. You can bring in parents that have participated in a drill like this, either at their workplace or at another school with another child. You can bring in a parent who perhaps has some expertise in emergency preparedness. I oftentimes caution schools against over-trusting a parent because oftentimes, a parent who might be a firefighter or a police officer can be really valuable in the emergency preparedness discussion, and they can be incredibly beneficial in, what we do and what we add and things like that. But their focus is not school safety in their regular job. And so although they can help us and they can apply some of their knowledge to school safety, they're going to do it through the lens of, well, whatever it is that they do. And so a firefighter who might be a disaster preparedness expert is going to look at our school the way that they look at the homes that they normally are trusted to prepare. And they're just two different beings, two different things. And so if you're looking to a parent to help you and they've got a broad amount of experience and expertise in this area, ask them for their advice, take their advice with a grain of salt, and know that they are giving you the best that they can, and they're likely very, very great in the field that they're in. It just may not be school specific, which poses its own challenges. And then finally, to increase the degree of difficulty, try that reunification thing. And I talk about this quite a bit, and in fact we've talked about it on the series a couple of times, and we'll continue to do so. In a couple of months we'll actually be hosting a webinar all about reunification. But again, reunification is the process by which we reunite a student with their parent. We put student A back with parent A and say, hey, you're good to go for the day. And so if you haven't tested that before, you haven't tried that before, perhaps the best way to ease into that is actually to start with a group of, say, 10 to 40 parents, depending on the size of your school. And if you have done it before, then perhaps the best thing that you can do is try it with everyone. I have a handful of elementary schools that will conduct reunification on an annual basis with every single student. I have a pretty large number, actually surprisingly large number of preschools that will do the same. Most of our middle schools will conduct reunification on an annual basis, and almost all of our high schools will do the same. Our high schools tend to be a little bit more focused on the reunification process because not only do they have parents that can come pick up their kids, they have kids that may actually pick up their kids. And so put differently, a high school senior may be trusted and responsible and actually even able to bring a freshman sibling home after an emergency. And so that adds to the degree of difficulty in and of itself. So again, if you haven't done the reunification step yet, I would suggest starting easy, start small. Make sure that you're successful because your parents are perhaps the most important audience that you could ever perform for. But if you have, certainly challenge yourself and either increase the number or just do it with everyone. Now, the next question is, do you need help? And absolutely. In order for you to conduct a good, meaningful, purposeful, and successful drill, you're going to need help. At minimum, you need your leadership team to actually buy into this and say, yeah, it's a good idea. I'll let you go for it. Right? If you don't have that, you're not going to get off the ground. It's nice if you have a safety committee in place, and safety committees are one of those things that for many schools are really, really helpful, really, really beneficial. For some schools, though, they're not for one reason or another. Either the committee approach gets bogged down by too many people involved, or too many people have too many different and sometimes even conflicting ideas. But either way, if you've got a committee in place, certainly leverage that. If you don't, I would suggest at least considering it. And again, if your school feels like an environment where that might bog things down, then don't. But at least have it run through your mind. Well, would it make sense? Would that give me some backup and some support? I like to think that any time that you're going to conduct a drill like this, or frankly, anytime you're going to do anything in the emergency preparedness world, that you'll have at least one partner in crime, at least one person who's there with you. And the scenario that I always think of is if you have kids and you prepare this great big drill and you're planning for it, and especially if this is the first time that you've done it, or it's a late year drill, so you've been planning for it all year long. And let's just say that your drill is going to be on, let's make it April 15th instead of in October. So you've planned for it all year long, and your drill comes up, it's April 12th, and you go, all right, and we've got everything set, the emergency notification system is ready, we're doing full reunification, we've communicated to everyone, here we go, we're so excited. Well, your own child wakes up with bronchitis that morning, and now you're in trouble, and you either have to go to school and leave your child at home not feeling well and without your help, and or you stay home and the drill suffers as a result. So at minimum, I like to think that you've got at least one partner in crime who can really stand in and fulfill your role if something happens. And of course, we don't wish bronchitis upon anybody, and that's just one example of about a million things that could go wrong on the day of the drill. But just to be sure that we've got that redundancy in place, because again, preparedness is about resilience and about being prepared. It makes a lot of sense to be prepared while we drill too. Now, external support and help can be incredibly beneficial, and again, depending on the type of support, there's a spectrum. Some support is a little bit easier to access, some support is a little bit better for you, but obviously bringing a consultant in can be helpful. If you have a really, really big school or a lot of complexities, I have some schools that are part of a religious organization, so a synagogue or a church, and then they have a school, and then for many of them they also then have an after-school program of sorts for the synagogue or for the church, and then for some of them they have a preschool or an ECC. For others they have the religious program that takes place on Tuesdays or Thursdays or Sundays or whatever the case may be. And so they end up with all of these different groups of people on campus that sometimes don't work together so well on a good day, other times do. But when we prepare for and get ready to conduct these emergency drills, they're all forced to work together. And so sometimes just having a third party come in and help really put all of those groups together is what it takes to get everybody conversing and everybody to be successful. Other times schools just need the help and support, and of course that's what we do for most of our schools. So it seems very easy and very logical. Now, other external support and help, a parent again can be a support system. They can help support you and give you the opportunity to leverage their knowledge. And then a peer school, and this is something that many of our schools have established over the course of the last several years, and I suspect that even more will begin to establish over the next. But as we really begin to look at business continuity for a school and what the financial and academic reconstruction looks like for a school, we find that more and more schools need to have relationships in place with others. If your school is compromised, your building is compromised, and the best example that I have of this is a school in Southern California, actually, who long story short, had a bomb threat on the first day of school. And the school was an elementary school. And on the first day of school, the threat came in, students had to be released. The threat was determined unfounded, and so the school resumed plans for everybody to come back the following day. This was Wednesday at this point. And the threat came in again that morning, and before everybody could get to school, they had to send out an emergency notification that said, everybody stay home today, so sorry, we've got the threat that's continued. Well, Thursday morning came around, and the same thing happened. And Friday morning came around, and the same thing happened. And by Friday, the school was saying, we have to start school. We have to do something because we've got these kids that are brand new to school that have been preparing for and adjusting for school for all of this time. They have to do something. Well, what we chose to do with them was to actually relocate school for a couple of weeks and allow them to figure out what was going on with their security and police concern, but simultaneously begin the academic process and begin the education that everybody was there for and needed. And so elementary school students from grades K through 6 actually went to a school down the street and were able to learn, and teachers showed up and were able to teach, and staff and faculty all came together and collectively were able to resume the school operation. And again, that's a conversation for another day, more related to business continuity and how we maintain resilience in spite of anything. But peer schools tend to be, and consistently are becoming, more and more a part of the emergency preparedness program. And finally, you're never alone, and it's important to us that you know that. Although obviously we work with hundreds of schools nationwide, and most of those schools work with us on an ongoing basis, we're also always here for you. And so if you don't work with us yet, you go, I just want some help, I need to just bounce some ideas off of somebody, to ask somebody if I'm ready for this or not, you're always welcome to give us a call or shoot us an email. The email is schools@joffeeemergencyservices.com, and I'll share that again with you towards the end of our conversation today. But the other option is, of course, just pick up the phone and give us a call. And just real quick before we go on, I'd like to just get an idea for how many, if any of you, feel like you need help increasing the degree of challenge and really increasing the degree of difficulty that's in place. So do you feel like you're capable of and comfortable conducting your next drill, conducting a big drill? And so I'll just put a poll up for you. And the question is, do you like, or rather do you feel like you need help from us at your next drill? And you know, as always, it's not enough for us just to give you the answers yes or no. Some of you may be so good that you should run all of the drills at our other schools, and so feel free to pick that answer as well. And I'll give you just a moment to give us and share with us those answers. All right, and let's see what you said. 100% yes. Before the end of the conversation today, we'll share with you an assessment tool, and I'll ask that you request an assessment, and we'll get somebody on site so that they can go over your plan for your next drill with you and make sure that we get you set up. That's incredible. I don't think I've seen 100% on a poll response in a webinar ever. So we'll jump back in. Thank you very much for your responses. The next question that I have for you, or the next question that I have as I look at preparing for a big drill or for a moulage drill, is what external resources should we be using? And I shared with you earlier, you know, the fire department, the police department, Joffe, of course, is a resource. Peer schools are a resource. So any of those are options for you, and you should feel really comfortable utilizing any and or all of those. We have some schools that actually use a variety of different resources, and they'll use them all together. We have others that feel that it's the best thing that they can do to just call on one. And again, there's not really a right answer. The most important thing is that you find what works for you. So let's talk tangible, and what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to give you a list of really some pretty concrete steps, and I'll prepare you for this. It's a relatively long list, but we're going to get tangible for a second and really help you create a plan for your next drill. So if you have a sheet of paper out already, great. If you don't, I'll give you just a second to grab one, and we'll bring it all together and really give you some concrete steps to follow as you prepare for your first or your next big drill. And here we go. So first and foremost, pick your drill and pick the degree of difficulty that you would like to utilize. And incidentally, for those of you that said you needed some help and support, we'll do this checklist again with you. So don't feel like if you're expecting that you're going to be bringing us out to plan for and to prepare for your next big drill, don't feel like you need to write every single thing here down, because again, one of our consultants will actually do this with you, and in fact, we do most of the work for you. But if you're a school that's looking at trying to bring this in yourself, then definitely you'll want to jot down as many notes as you can as we go through this. So first, pick your drill rather, and your degree of difficulty that you're ready for. So what type of drill are you going to do, and how hard do you want to make it? How hard are you comfortable making it? Next, pick your date and time. You'll notice that we start early with scheduling, because scheduling on a school campus can be among the most difficult things to do. In fact, it's arguably harder than finding a new head of school. Next, pick your team. Who do you want to be on your team? Who do you want to know about the drill? Do you want to run it as a surprise drill versus a regular drill? Do you want to make sure that everybody on campus knows about it, or just a select group? Is your safety committee going to be involved? So step 3 is really pick your team. Who are you going to use to create the drill? Who's going to be involved in it, and then who's going to be aware of it? Get leadership on board. So now that you've got a concrete idea, you've got a concrete date, go to leadership and say, we're ready to do this. What do you think? Give them an opportunity to give some feedback on the type of drill that we do, on the degree of difficulty that we utilize. Plan your scenario. So every drill that we conduct, we like to set aside a very concrete scenario. There was a 5.3 earthquake that shook the Bay Area, and here's what happened next. There's a tornado that's coming down and that we anticipated from 400 miles, well, that's a little bit long. All right, let's say from 40 miles away. And we were prepared for it in advance, so we actually asked everybody to move, and they were in their tornado safe space, and when the tornado came through, it took half of the building out of commission. Whatever the case may be, get as specific with your scenarios as you can. Plan your technology. So based on the scenario that you've established, what technology do you want and need? Is your emergency notification system the only technology that you'll want and need, or do you need something more in-depth? Do you need something that's going to have more capability? If so, do you have those resources already or not? And then plan your inserts or your injects. Now, your inserts or injects are going to be items that you add if you feel like you're ready for them. Oftentimes in the academic world, they'll be referred to as stretch activities. And so, you know, here we are, we're doing a great job, and then if things are going so well that we actually want to increase the degree of difficulty on the spot, here's a way to do so. So create those, plan those, and oftentimes I will use things like an aftershock, or the weather changes, or parents begin to show up at the gates. So things that are tangible, that are real, that are likely and realistic, but also things that are very scalable, so that we can use them as much or as little as we want to. Next, host your staff or faculty meeting. So get everybody else on board. So you've talked about it. Now it's time to actually get everybody on board. Prepare your students and your parent community, and you'll notice that that's step 9 and 9A, if you will. I oftentimes will prepare those two communities simultaneously. So the same day that we do our conversation with our students about it in all-school meeting, we'll send a note out to parents as well. Or even the day before, perhaps, we'll send a note out to parents and say, hey, this is what's coming up. So that everybody knows what's going on and the students don't know and go home and tell their parents about this great big drill that's happening without their parents getting an opportunity to participate and be aware of it. Then do the drill. And I actually didn't write in, as soon as the drill is done, take a deep, deep sigh of relief, and then debrief, and survey the entire community. So students, staff, faculty, parents, external responders, get everybody's feedback, because one of the things that we know about emergencies is that there are a lot of different perspectives, there are a lot of different ways to be successful, and there are a lot of different ways that we can overcome challenges. And so I challenge everyone to actually share their feedback and to give us an opportunity to learn from what they saw or participated in. And then debrief, and then debrief, and then debrief. What we like to do in emergencies is consistently and regularly debrief how the emergency went, and so I like to bring that to the drill. And that way we have an opportunity to debrief on a large scale with everyone, on a little bit smaller scale with our safety committee or our core team that worked with us, on an even smaller scale directly with our head of school, and then on an even smaller scale just with ourselves, and take a moment to reflect and really evaluate how it went. I'll give you just a moment to ask any questions that you may have. And again, that question bar is there on the right-hand side of your screen. And there's some really great questions that are coming in, some that we'll actually have to follow up with you directly on. But the last thing that I'll share with you, and as we get ready to conclude and prepare you to actually run your own drills on campus, is there are a couple of resources that we have available, and in fact I'll hop right into it. So I'd like to just take a moment to say thank you so much for being here with us today, for learning about the drill that we've talked about, and again, we've sort of buttressed it as an October drill, and for many of you that's exactly what it'll be. For others of you it may not be, and that's entirely okay. The last thing that I want you to do is feel like you're rushed or you need to conduct a drill sooner than you're ready to do so. But nonetheless, feel free to email any questions, challenges, concerns that you may have to us at schools@joffeeemergencyservices.com. And then down below, make sure that you're signed up for our Thursday webinar series. So if today was a webinar that you enjoyed, or you heard anything about a future webinar while we talked today, and it sounds like something that you'd like to participate in the future, please join us for this series. And again, next week we'll be talking about movement restriction. Thereafter, we'll start to talk about continuity in schools and some of the increased degree of difficulty that we look at for preparedness overall. And of course, we'll continue to talk about the various teams that we have on campuses and the types of drills that they ought to be conducting. And finally, as a thank you for being with us today, we'd like to offer each of you a complimentary school safety assessment. So if you felt like you really needed some help and support conducting your next drill, this is definitely something that you'll want to complete. You can click the link on your screen, or you can click the link that will chat out to you. In fact, it looks like we chatted out to you just a moment ago. But go ahead and get signed up, and what will happen is we'll contact you. We'll set up an assessment, and the assessment is a very, very easy and also very, very quick but important part of the process. So we'll get an idea for who you are, who your school is, what your unique challenges are, and we'll make sure that we can actually support you. And if for any reason we have concerns or challenges, we'll share those with you right off the bat. If there's anything that you're not doing yet that you absolutely must, we'll share that with you right off the bat. And then we'll get ready to actually prepare for a drill. Most of our schools will work on an annual basis, and so over the course of a year, we'll prepare for the big drill, and then over the course of the following, we'll actually conduct all of the feedback and make sure that we've got all of the process in place so that we can do another one and can do one even more successfully than the last. So share with us your thoughts by way of that school safety assessment, and or email us at schools@joffeeemergencyservices.com. And again, of course, make sure you're signed up for the Thursday webinar series so that you have an opportunity to join us for really every webinar and every conversation that we have related to schools and how we keep them safe. So thank you again so much for being here with us today. If you have any further questions at all, we look forward to helping you answer those, and we hope to see you on the next webinar.